Most of you have heard this phrase. See if you can finish it for me. No good deed goes what? You've heard that. It's pretty common in our culture. I was looking to see if I could figure out who actually coined that, who came up with that phrase. And there's a lot of different people that have been credited with coming up with it. So I'm not sure exactly who started it, but I bet it's something probably most of us have experienced, where you tried to do something nice for someone, and then for whatever reason, it backfired, or it blew up in your face, or maybe in some way it came back to bite you, maybe even literally. I have a friend that tried to do something nice. They saw this dog that got loose, and they stopped what they were doing, stopped to try to help this person catch the dog before it got hit by a car. That's a really nice thing to do, right? And so they were trying to catch this dog and I guess caught it. And then the dog bit her. And so she had to go to the doctor and get shots. It was a whole thing. And the people at the urgent care, one of the nurses at the urgent care said, well, I guess what we've learned is no good deed goes unpunished. It's a common thing that people say. It's not actually completely true. Yes, those things do happen sometimes, but it's not true to say that every good deed, right? I'm sure there's plenty of examples where you've done something nice for someone and it didn't blow up in your face, it didn't come back to bite you, it went kind of the way that you had hoped, all right? So it's not an exactly an accurate thing to say that every good deed goes this way, but I do think it's happened to us in life enough, and maybe only once or twice, but sometimes that's enough, where we have these negative experiences when we try to do something good, try to do something nice, try to do something kind and loving, and it doesn't turn out the way we hope. We have these negative experiences, and it's easy to become cynical. It's easy to take that experience because it was negative and say, well, I guess I learned my lesson, and the lesson being, I'll never do that again. I did this, and they didn't appreciate it. They didn't say thank you. Or I did this, and it didn't turn out the way that I had hoped. I came alongside this person. They were having a problem. I tried to help them with their problem, and nothing changed, right? Those things happen sometimes. Or you got hurt in the process. Maybe not physically with a dog bite, but you were hurt. You were wounded through the process of trying to do something nice. And so there's the temptation there to become cynical and to ask the question, was it really worth it? Was it really worth it? Of course, we are very thankful that Jesus did not think this way. Jesus challenges us to think differently. He modeled a different way of thinking when he was going to the cross, and we're very thankful for that. We're very thankful that Jesus didn't get halfway up the hill to Calvary and say, you know what? I'm done. Look at the crowd and say, listen, for 3 years, I've been going around and I've been healing people of blindness and leprosy. I've been healing people of paralysis. I've been healing people that have this messed up stuff going on in their lives and been showing kindness and compassion and love and mercy. And this is how you're going to treat me? I'm done. It's not worth it. Of course, we're very thankful that Jesus didn't say that Jesus went all the way to Calvary, and he was willing to take the criticism and the beatings and the spitting and the mocking. He was willing to take the nails on the cross so that you and I could be forgiven, so that you and I could be made right with God. Jesus not only told us to give away love, he demonstrated for us what self-giving love really looks like, and we're very thankful. We're very thankful for that. This morning, what we are going to be talking about is this idea of self-giving love. And what I'm hoping that we'll walk away with this morning is this. I hope that you'll be able to see that what we're going to talk about today really will help fuel all of the other qualities of love that we've been talking about up until this point. What I'm hoping that you'll walk away with this morning is seeing how self-giving love not only fuels, but really helps us, motivates us to be able to love like Jesus. That's what we really want, right? We want to live a Jesus-centered life. Part of that that certainly means that we need to love like Jesus. And if we look at his example, we know that Jesus was mindful of others. We know that he was approachable, even to those that were on the fringes and others would reject. We know that Jesus was full of grace. We know that Jesus just had this fearless love. And so we want to love like that. We want to learn how to love like Jesus. But if we're going to do that, we need something that's going to fuel us, something that's going to motivate us to get from where we are to a place where we are loving more like that, loving more like Jesus. And what I think we're going to talk about today is going to help us get from wherever we are to that place where we're loving more like him. Here's why. If I'm going through life and I'm very selfish, it's going to be really, really hard for me to be mindful of other people around me, right? Does that make sense? If I go through life and I'm just focused on myself, it's going to be really, really challenging for me and for you to be filled with grace and mercy, to worry about people who are rejected, to even think about people that maybe aren't accepted, and to walk across the room and show friendship and kindness. We're not going to be thinking about those things. It's not going to be on our radar if we're selfish, if we are self-focused. But if we have this self-giving love that Jesus had, well, now all of a sudden we've got a motivation. Now all of a sudden we've got fuel to get us to this place where we're being more mindful, more filled with grace, a greater fearless kind of love that is expressed in the way that we treat others and the way that we do life. So to help us get a really good picture of what this looks like, I'm going to ask you to join me in Luke chapter 10. If you would open your Bibles, if you didn't bring yours with you this morning, go ahead and grab the one that's in the pew in front of you. Luke chapter 10. You can take notes this morning on the notes page that you got when you came in, on your tablet, on your phone. If you go to our website, there's a place there for notes. You can take notes right there. We're going to look at this iconic story in Luke chapter 10 this morning, and it's one of those stories that has transcended time and culture, and even in our world today, this story has inspired the mission of many hospitals. This story has inspired a worldwide organization that goes and does disaster relief and sends Christmas gifts to children in third world countries. This story has inspired laws for people to protect people from lawsuits who step out if there's an emergency, there's something going on, and they step out encouraged to help that person, and maybe it doesn't turn out the way that we all hope it would turn out, but there are laws in place to protect people who try. Laws in place called Good Samaritan laws that help protect these kinds of things when we try to help others. And so the story that we're going to look at, this story of the Good Samaritan, is an iconic story that even people that don't even maybe know that it comes from the Bible have been impacted by this story. And I know that some of you are, you've been around Bible teaching long enough that you have an understanding of the cultural and historical significance of the relationship, the bad, poor relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans, right? Some of you have that understanding because you've studied Scripture and you studied the Bible long enough to know that. But I wanted to give all of you just a quick picture, even if you don't know anything about that dynamic or why it happened and where it came from. I want to give you a quick picture as to the reality of this tension between the Jews and the Samaritans in the first century. In chapter 9, just a chapter before the story we're going to look at, chapter 9, verse 51. Look at this story that takes place. Chapter 9 of Luke, verse 51. As the time drew near for Jesus to ascend to heaven. Now we understand what needs to take place for that, right? He has to go to the cross, the resurrection, and then the ascension. All these things need to take place. And so it's getting close for the time of those things to happen. And Jesus is resolutely setting out for Jerusalem. Why? Because that's where these things take place, right? And it's getting close, so he has to get to Jerusalem. Now, verse 52, he sent messengers ahead to a Samaritan village to prepare for his arrival. But the people of the Samaritan village did not welcome Jesus because he was on his way to Jerusalem. I'm like, no, we're not interested. If that's where you're going, no, just go somewhere else. Don't even bother coming to our village. We don't want you here. Look how James and John respond. When James and John, two of the disciples, saw this, they said to Jesus, Lord, should we call down fire from heaven and burn them up? Jesus turns to them, he rebukes them, and he says, no, we're just going to go to another village. It's a pretty strong response between James and John there. They're like, hey, you don't want us coming to your village? Oh, that's fine. How about we just burn your village to the ground? How about we do that, right? It's a really strong response. And in their minds, now get this, they're walking around with Jesus for 3 years. They're listening to him teach on love and grace and mercy and compassion. And yet their response, they actually think that Jesus is going to be on board. They're expecting Jesus to say, yeah, let's do it. Let's burn this place down. They're expecting him to say that. And so I think it gives us a little bit more of a reality of what this tension actually was like between the Jewish people and the Samaritans. So hopefully that will help when we read through this story together in Luke chapter 10. I'm going to start in verse 25. It sets up the story of why Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan in the first place. So here we go. Verse 25 says, one day an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question. Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus replied, well, what does the law of Moses say? How do you read it? How do you understand it? The man answered, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus says, you're right. Do this, and you will live. And apparently there's something going on in this man's life, in his heart, and his mind, something that when he hears this, he knows that he is not living up to that standard, right? What's his question? How do I inherit eternal life? And then he answers his own questions. He said, yeah, that's it. You need to love God with your whole self and love others. And then he wants to justify himself because he's apparently not living up to that standard. And he says in verse 29, the man wanted to justify his actions. So he asked Jesus, okay then, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? It's an interesting question. What does it mean to love my neighbor? What does it look like to love my neighbor? If I could rephrase what I think he's asking is this. How far does this whole love thing really go? Like, where's the edge? Where's the limit? Where's the boundary to where this whole love your neighbor thing, where's the limit of that? Like, what? Show me the limit. I'll do that, but not one step farther. And I think we ask that kind of question all the time. I think we ask that kind of question all the time. Like, where's the limit? What's really expected of me? Okay, I'll do that, but I'm not going beyond that. So just tell me what's expected. Show me the boundary, and I'll work really hard to work up to that limit, that boundary. We don't often just automatically say, well, what's expected, and then I'm willing to go beyond that. Because here's why. What if it blows up in my face? Right? We have these negative experiences. Oh, I tried that. I tried to be loving and kind. I tried to have self-giving love, and I did this, and it blew up my face. They didn't appreciate it. They weren't kind to me. This happened. It was not a good experience. And so I don't want to do that again. What if this person doesn't appreciate what I've done? Or what if they don't even deserve my kindness in the first place? I want to know, where's the limit? Where's the boundary? What's really expected of me? Who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? How far do we have to take this whole love thing? In Matthew 5:41, you can look it up if you would like. Matthew chapter 5, verse 41, Jesus was giving his famous Sermon on the Mount. And as he was giving that sermon, he lays out what has become the gold standard in today's customer service world. In the world of customer service today, the gold standard is this: go the extra mile. You've heard that phrase, right? Go the extra mile. And when people in the world of customer service go the extra mile, it's special, it's memorable, right? Why is it special and memorable? Because most people are looking for what's expected. Okay, here's the limit, here's the line, here's the minimum that I have to do to not get fired. That's what I'm going to do. It's not normal and natural. It's unusual, in fact, for a lot of people to experience customer service going the extra mile. That's why it's so special and memorable when it happens. Well, Jesus is the one who talked about this idea of going the extra mile in Matthew chapter 5. There was a Roman law at that time where boys in villages were required by law. If Roman soldiers would come through the village, they would be required to carry the backpack for the Roman soldier 1 mile from their home. It was intended to give the soldiers a rest from carrying their gear as they marched across the empire. And so what young boys would do, they would figure out where 1 mile was in any direction from their home, whatever roads would lead from their home. They would figure out where is exactly 1 mile, and they would put a stake in the ground by the road so they would know where that was. This is the limit. This is the boundary, and I'm not going one more step beyond what is required of me. And then Jesus comes along in Matthew chapter 5, verse 41, and he says this: if anyone forces you, or if a soldier forces you to go 1 mile, and they all knew what he was talking about, Jesus then said, then go with him 2 miles. Go the extra mile. Go beyond what is expected. Go beyond what is required of you. And when we do this, we are living out a self-giving love. It's not a self-focused way of life. Keep that in mind, that this is what Jesus taught about what it means to love your neighbor. Okay? Let's look at the story back in Luke chapter 10, verse 30. Jesus replies to this man, who's my neighbor? Here's the story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, and they left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant, you might have the word Levite would be a temple assistant, walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan, now it might sound like a strong word to use there, but keep in mind, it was only a few days or whatever that James and John, right, they're ready to burn down a Samaritan village because they were offended. Right? So these tensions are real. And Jesus says, a despised Samaritan came along and he saw the man. He felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If the bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time that I'm here. And then Jesus asked the man who asked the original question, who's my neighbor? How far do we have to take this whole love thing? And he asked him, all right, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the bandits? And the man replies, well, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, you're right. Now go and do the same. Go and live that kind of love. It's surprising and it's memorable because of who demonstrates the love, right? The Samaritan to the Jew. It's surprising and it's memorable for that reason, but it's also surprising and memorable because of how far this Samaritan was willing to go to demonstrate that love. He went the extra mile. He went way beyond what would have been expected, way beyond the minimum of what it looks like to show basic kindness and compassion to someone who's hurting. Everything that we've talked about, we can see in this Samaritan. All the qualities of love we can see in him. And if you think about it, they're all fueled, they're all motivated by this self-giving love. Look, the Samaritan was mindful, right? He was mindful of someone who was in need. There's someone in need. I'm sure he's got places to be, right? Things to do. But he's mindful. Here's a need. I need to stop and help. The Samaritan was approachable in that he reached out to someone that other people had rejected. The Samaritan was full of grace in that he did not limit his love to someone maybe that he would consider deserves it. The Samaritan was fearless in his love in that he risked being criticized, he risked being rejected by his own people, by helping someone that his culture said he should hate and should have nothing to do with. And so he was fearless in his love. And you think about what was it that motivated him to be mindful and approachable and filled with grace and fearless? What fueled that? What's a self-giving love that fuels that? Here's why. Because if we go through life and we are selfish and only self-focused, we're not going to be mindful of people around us that are hurting. If we go through life selfish and self-focused, we're not going to be thinking about how I can be approachable and how I can reach out to someone who's on the margin, someone who's been pushed aside and rejected. We're not going to care because we're only going to care about ourselves. We're not going to be filled with grace, right? You hurt me. You said something that offended me. You did this. I'm not going to give you grace. Why? Because I'm only thinking about my pain. I'm only thinking about my offense rather than thinking about you and what might be going on in your life that may have caused you to do that or say that. So if we're going to move from wherever we are to becoming more like Jesus and loving more like Him, it's got to be fueled not with selfishness, not with self-focus, but with this self-giving kind of love that Jesus demonstrated, that Jesus challenged us to do. We're going to wrap this challenge up, or this series up, with a challenge. It's a challenge that Jesus gave about this very thing. And I think it's a very practical challenge. I think it's possibly something that's going to push you into a place where it's going to be maybe even uncomfortable, and that's probably a good thing. Here's the challenge that I want to finish up this series with. It's in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. It's on the screen. Jesus said this. Jesus gave this challenge. He said, "Do to others what you would have them do to you." He said that sums up the law, that sums up the prophets, that sums up what we should be doing, what God expects of us. And I don't want you to misunderstand the challenge that Jesus is giving here. Because there's been a lot of people throughout history, philosophers and moralists, who have said, do not do to other people what you don't want them to do to you. Right? You probably have heard something like that, and there's nothing wrong with that principle. It's a good principle. But it's not this principle. It's very different from what Jesus actually challenged us to do. Because you can actually live out that other principle without much effort. You can live that out without much sacrifice at all. It doesn't really cost you and I anything to not do something that we shouldn't be doing anyway. Jesus says something very different. He says, do to others what you would want them to do to you. Ask yourself, what would you want people to do for you? How would you want people to treat you? And then grab a little bit of initiative, have a little intentional thought, and put a little effort in, and then go and do that for someone else. That's what Jesus is challenging us to do. And that's very different from the other principle. You can be absolutely lazy and apathetic in life and still fulfill the don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you. right? But you can't be lazy and apathetic in life and do what Jesus challenges us to do. You can't, because it requires intentional thought and effort and energy. It requires something, sometimes sacrifice, if you're going to do what Jesus challenges us to do. It's going to require a self-giving love. So here's how I think we can do this. What if we committed ourselves to accept this challenge that Jesus gave? What if you wrote down on your notes page or on your tablet, wrote down somewhere 3 things that you would want someone to do for you? That might at first seem overwhelming, and I don't want you even to automatically jump to some random act of love and kindness right away. It might manifest itself like that, but just think even basically like this. We all want to be respected, right? You want people to respect you. You want people to appreciate you. We all want people to extend to us grace and understanding and patience. No one goes through life, gets up in the morning and says, you know what I really hope? Today would be amazing if everyone treated me with absolutely no respect. Man, if I could just get people to show me less respect than they did yesterday, that would be an amazing day. Nobody thinks that way. Nobody goes through life and thinks, hey, I think it would be pretty amazing if the next time that I mess up, the next time I fall short, I really hope that nobody shows me any grace or understanding. I hope that they are absolutely brutal to me. Nobody says that. Nobody thinks that way. Nobody goes through life and thinks, man, if I go out to the store today, wouldn't it be amazing if I got to the store and every person I had interaction with today, whether it was at work, the store, at school, if everyone was impatient with me, if everyone had zero ability to be kind to me today, what a great day that would be. So we all want those things, so we can be committed and intentional about giving kindness, patience, grace, understanding, respect. We can give those things to other people, whether they deserve it or not, right? That's the whole grace thing. And if we are giving, this self-giving kind of love is going to fuel that motivation to want to do those things. How about going the extra mile? I've been in different stores, different environments with customer service, and I've had the experience where you ask a question or you ask for help, and the person says, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I'm on break. Oh, okay. Is there anybody else that you know of this entire store that maybe, and they wouldn't even find somebody else to help me. We've probably all had those kinds of experiences where you ask for help, you ask, hey, could you help me with this? And the person says, no, that's not my job. Awesome. Is there somebody around here that you could find that it is there? No. Right? Those are not fun experiences. And because we've had those experiences, when people go the extra mile and you ask a question, hey, I need help with this, or where's this? And that person says, well, it's not my department, but here, I'm going to walk with you. They don't use the walkie-talkie. They take you and they try to find someone who can help you. They go the extra mile. It's special and it's memorable, right? It makes an impact on people. We can go the extra mile. We can absolutely go the extra mile, and we can be intentional about doing that. Write 3 things down that you would want someone to do for you. Now watch. That's like part 1 of the challenge. Really great, you can write those things down, right? Really important, you can write those things down. But if you don't do part 2, which is actually doing those things for someone else, you've missed the challenge. So write those 3 things down, and then be intentional this week about doing those 3 things. Now, you really want to push yourself? Do it for someone that you don't know. Why would that? Well, I just think it's a lot more challenging to do those kinds of things for someone that you don't know. It's a little harder than doing it for someone that you know and someone you like. And challenges, by definition, should be challenging, right? How about this? You want to push yourself a little bit farther? This is going to be radical. It's going to blow some of your minds. How about, what if you did those 3 things, maybe one of them, for someone you don't even like? someone you don't even get along with, someone that you might say is my enemy. Almost sounds like in my mind, I can remember Jesus saying something along the lines of love your enemies, right? Does that sound familiar? What if we did that? How radical would that be? Write down 3 things and then be intentional about it this week. What if it's not appreciated? What if it blows up in your face? What if it comes back to bite you? Okay. Then I guess you've got a choice to make. Are you going to become cynical and say, I'm not doing that again? Or do you keep loving like Jesus? Do you keep continuing to choose love? I hope you'll continue to choose love. I hope you'll continue to choose to not give up on love and keep loving other people like Jesus. Before we finish up, I just want to give this one last challenge to you one more time. I've been talking about it the whole month. I just don't want you walking away from this series thinking that the whole point of this is to become a nicer person. Yeah, you might be a nicer person, and that's good. There's some value in that. We can all probably use that in our lives. But if that's the only thing you walk away with, then I don't think we've accomplished what I was hoping we would accomplish. There are people in your life, people you work with, people in your family, there are people you go to school with. They need to hear about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Their lives need to be transformed by Jesus. And they just are not going to be interested in anything that you have to say if you are a self-focused person. They're just not. But if we can learn to love like Jesus, yes, we might be perceived as being a nice person, and that's okay. But if we can learn to love like Jesus and go the extra mile where it's special, where it's memorable, where it makes an impact in people's lives, well, now maybe we have the opportunity to tell them about Jesus. So let's say you do these challenges this week for someone you don't know, someone you don't even really care for that much. At some point along the way, it's very possible someone's going to ask you, why did you do that? And here's what you can say. Because that's what Jesus did for me. Jesus went the extra mile for me. And I want to live a Jesus-centered life. I'm trying to learn how to love more like Him. It's what He did for me. It's what I want to do for you. See how impactful that could possibly be in a conversation? I hope this series has been challenging to your heart. I know it's been for me. I've seen a lot of shortcomings in my own love. And I hope along the way maybe there's some things that have tugged at your heart too.